Welcome to the Theology Experience, where my goal is to experience theology through long-form open dialogue. I'm your host, Trey Brickley, and today we are experiencing theology with Jared Caspari. Jared is a husband, father, carpenter, and worship leader. Jared is the owner of Shalom Restorations, a carpentry business in Florida, and the creator of Refining Exegetics, a podcast and biblical studies channel which aims to inspire life-changing interpretation of the Bible as well as our stories through unique explorations of modern biblical scholarship and ancient wisdom. Jared, welcome. I'm glad you joined me for episode 12 of the Theology Experience.
Thank you for having me, Trey. Yeah, again, it's great to finally be able to have this episode with you, and we've gone through a number of obstacles to make it to this point, but again, appreciate the time, and I appreciate you and the work that you do, uh, and I have enjoyed this channel of yours.
Good, yeah, and I've enjoyed your work as well, both unrecorded and recorded. As I was going to say, in addition to the introduction I had there for you, you and I connected several years ago through, I believe, the Unitarian Christian Alliance. And since then, you've been a key person in my journey, helping me from my perspective to see the light of the law of God through darkness I've experienced in my life of doubt and agnosticism. In fact, I would say that without question, you've been the person that I've learned the most from in the past 3 years. As I said, having many recorded and unrecorded theological conversations. So I'm very excited to have you on for this episode to learn more from you through the conversation that we're about to have, but also to introduce you to the followers of my channel who may not yet be familiar with you, because I think you have a valuable voice, specifically on the topics that you address. And so I'm very excited. Now, with that being said, I do just want to kind of go through my normal bullet points of topics I talk with every guest, starting with your theological journey, getting more of a sense of how you grew up, encountered the Bible and theology, where you came from in terms of your theological perspective, where you are now, and then how our stories intersect. So, with that being said, take it away. Give us as much of your story as you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Um, Well, I'm currently in Florida, Central Florida, but I was born and grew up in the Midwest in Missouri. And uh, I was raised sort of in your typical Protestant non-denominational environment. My parents uh, were within that not just non-denominational tradition in Protestantism. And uh, very early on, I was exposed to my exposure, I should say, to the Word of God was uh, through uh, scripture memory exercises as part of children's ministries and things of that nature. So it was more for the purpose of, at least from my vantage point, was for the purpose of getting awards and candies uh, and things of that nature. The um, the ministry that I was involved with as a kid, through the church that we were at, was called Sunlight Ministries, and there were, depending on your gender and your age, there's a few different tiers within that ministry that you would fall into. You began as a king's kid, um, and then when you kind of age out of that, and if you're a if you're a boy, you become a knight, and if you're a girl, you become an angel. Uh, which is, I always find that, looking back on that now, I always thought that was interesting ontologically. uh, um, to call them angels, but uh, anyways, the um interwoven into that uh ministry, and sort of the identity that kind of the motif that kind of carries, as far as being a king's kid, or a knight. um uh I was fascinated early on, or maybe I should say captured, uh as a boy or early on with the sort of the romanticized ideas of knighthood, and realizing nowadays that a lot of that, was romanticized in popular culture. Um, and there's a lot more to it than that. Uh, but anyways, it was uh, the something that was fundamental to that motif that kind of got woven into the core of me early on was living by a code, and so there was things like honor and chivalry, and but it even more than that is your life was lived as in service to a king or to a ruler, and you were to protect the poor, uphold the needy. Um, and even before I understood that that's what the the way of life and the commandments of the Lord were intended to do was for His people to uphold the needy and um, um, honor the king, love the brotherhood, and the things that are just like basic 101 of Christianity in the Bible. That those things had a connection point with me even outside of that context of God's word. And so when I started to connect with those things in God's word, it was sort of like a perfect recipe, I should say, to really ingrain something deep within my being. And at the I was 12 years old around the in the summer, and there was a summer camp that I had gone to for a number of years. And well, in one evening at the near the end of one of those times, uh, I went off in the woods by myself, just outside the camp, and uh, and the Lord encountered me for the first time there. I had an encounter with him, and Yeshua came and he uh, he spoke to me and said to the effect that, well, let me set a little context. I think the reason why he came to me is because I was really searching him out, uh, because I had this growing sense that something just wasn't right in life, that I wasn't where I needed to be, wasn't where I wanted to be, um, and I was trying to put those things together. There wasn't something that was right in me, uh, and Yeshua came and he spoke very clearly to me and said, uh, "You are not to live in the kingdom of this world anymore. I want you to be." Uh, a knight in my kingdom. My kingdom is coming, and it's not the kingdom of this world. And I want you to live uh, and learn how to live in my kingdom. And so I mean, that's about as much as I understood as a 12-year-old boy. But um, I pledged my life to him at that point. Um, and say, uh, in the coming years, between that time and the time that I would uh, go into uh, to high school, and something else that came just ingrained in me was I would read passages like Isaiah 32 that talks about um, what it's like in the Messianic age, in the age to come, and it says things like rulers will rule with justice, and every man will be like the shelter um, of a great rock in a dry land. Sort of this idea where it provides shade, shelter, and a refuge from storms. Um, and it sort of juxtaposes that um, with the wicked, um, who um, who um, prey upon the poor and the needy, and but then it rounds that out. It really ends that with this really clear statement of the noble man makes noble plans, and by noble deeds he stands. And different translations render that somewhat in various ways, but uh, it is I needed to be a noble person, um, and not out of a sense um, of having to measure up and perform and um, like play act or something like that, something that I'm not, but it's out of a sense of this is just who I am. This is There's something about the kingdom that I'm meant to manifest, embody, and so it's just this is just me fleshing out the kingdom in the way that in the best way that I know how. And so I get into high school, and my family we moved to Columbia, Missouri, and I start high school, and the mascot of the high school that I'm at is Knights. Go figure.
Wow.
So that wasn't planned. It wasn't. It was just. It just turned out that way. At least not planned on our part. I think the Lord had a hand in that, but it's like I got to really drive this home and get it into this boy, so so he can live it out for decades and not be swayed um, by the culture. Um, Again, this is something that transcends the culture and the times. It's something that's it's eternal. It's in the heart of God, and He wants to make manifest on the earth, not just through me, but I have a uniqueness about me that uniquely manifests that in ways that others won't. So,
Right.
um, and so it's about that. The end of high school, I joined the Air Force right off the bat. I didn't have any desire to go into college. I didn't have any direction as far as that. So it would have been a real waste of time for me to just at that point to go into to college. I had a fascination with aircraft and with the military, so I joined the Air Force. Uh, and um, I would say that that was a transition for me into where for the first time on a consistent basis, I was studying the scriptures with others. Um, and it was uh, it's more of the type of topical Bible studies. I was had This was with primarily with the military navigators ministry, and I'm very grateful for that. There's people there in Langley Air Force Base or in that area, Virginia, that I still um, regularly communicate with, and just we have a very strong brotherly bond there. So it's really neat and impactful. But um, that's where I began to actually really look at more deeply the scriptures. And uh, one thing that really drove me into the direction that I am today is, though growing up in and being immersed in that sort of Protestant and sometimes a little bit reformed, um, because there's even in Protestantism, there's a lot of the reformed ideas that kind of just hang around.
Yeah. The hangovers.
um, yeah, hangovers. Yeah. Um, and uh, but a lot of even though being just in that spiritual and that religious environment and that tradition, a lot of the doctrines and things that are spoken of as doctrines, the doctrines of grace or the doctrine of the imputation of Christ's righteousness, the doctrine of this and the doctrine of that. Um, I uh, I paid lip service to a lot of that, but at the same time, it none of it really made sense to me. It didn't make sense on a practical level. And I think there's a reason for that. And this is something that will come up a lot in my conversations. Uh, is a lot of the what we call the doctrines of, whenever you see that phrase, what follows is typically something that's more or less a propositional statement. Um, and the point is to confess the propositional statement. And then there's usually followed by one or two or three proof texts to um, to to prop up this propositional statement. And um, but there's usually not much practicality to the statement. Like there's no connection point to actually like living. It's just a statement that's out there. That's a confession. It's a um and when I um the more that I studied the scriptures, the more those things became less important. It's like that's cool, I guess. Yeah, Jesus gives me his righteousness. I mean, that's an interesting idea. It sounds pious. And um, meanwhile, I'm over here like, how do I live out the kingdom principles? How do I uh um and the sort of proposition that Christ did something that I couldn't do, that I could never do, and now I can just rest in that, and that's the imputation of Christ's righteousness. It it doesn't move you. It doesn't, or at least it didn't move me. It didn't have any sort of um, power beyond just I can say this, and now I can feel like I'm in the in crowd um, because I confess this, and um, it's sort of like it's like a shibboleth. If people aren't familiar with that term, that's where I forget the exact passage, but basically um there was a test that the Israelites had put upon some people to test whether they were legitimate or not, whether they were part of their group, uh, and they had to pronounce a certain word, and if they couldn't pronounce that word because this particular group they couldn't pronounce that syllable in their language, and so that was the tell that's like, oh, you're not one of us. And but the term was shibboleth. And and so these are statements that you sort of say, and to let people know that you're a card carrying Protestant, solo fide, um solo gratia, uh um solo gloria. It's just by grace alone, by faith alone, through Christ alone, for the glory of God alone. You know, it's just says, okay, that's great.
Yeah,
um
that's one popular Protestant set of shibboleths, but their
yeah.
examples could be multiplied within
Hmm.
a bunch of different groups. But yeah, point taken.
Hmm. Yeah. And um what I encountered of quote unquote biblical studies at that time a lot was you grant these propositional statements, and then you're you use the Bible to now defend them. You use the Bible and philosophical reasoning to defend them, and that's typically what's called apologetics. And that was when I started to get into that. I mean, it was stimulating at first because you feel like you're getting deeper into your faith by understanding and picking apart, then systematizing, and then defending these various propositional statements. And that was appealing until I started to realize what I was doing with the Bible. Um, I was systematizing it. I was using it, ripping passages out of context, um, and what some a lot of that sort of really came into focus when I eventually did after, let's see, about 13 years, 12 or 13 years of being in the Air Force. I decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do some college. So my wife and I, at the time we got married in 2012, I'm sorry, 2011, and it was in 2012 that we moved up to British Columbia, Canada, and I was studying on a student visa there at a private Bible college, and it was Anabaptist sort of background. Um, uh, which was interesting. But I went there because they had a stellar outdoor leadership, wilderness guiding program major, but it was at a college, so you at a Bible college, so you have your core courses of biblical studies and hermeneutics and um, things like that. Uh, and um, I started to that's where I started to get training in actual biblical studies. And the more that I was getting into that, the more I realized that apologetics actually does a lot of. Uh, I'm not going to make wide sweeping statements about apologetics here. I mean, sometimes I'm given to that, but it's um, it sort of stultifies the process of actually objectively looking at the Bible and analyzing the text and its context. Um, as opposed, I mean, with apologetics, you're fundamentally using the Bible to defend something that you believe. You're defending the faith. Um, uh, but it's um that's primarily what apologetics has been about, has been taking these propositional statements, even in the broader sense of uh, trying to prove God's existence or something like that. You're taking a statement, God exists, and then you're trying to defend it against the secular world that says God doesn't exist. And uh, the the verse that is sort of the foundation for apologetics is the passage uh, in Peter's letter where he says uh, that always be ready to give an answer um, for the hope that you have, and that Greek word is apologia, and that was sort of co-opted and used for this whole idea of defending your faith. Um, but in the context of Peter, apologia was you're under persecution, you're brought before a tribune, and to answer for your way of life, and for why you're not, uh, for instance, worshiping our gods, and you're in a sense being pressured to forsake your way of life and your God, and now you're having to give a reason for why you're not going to do that, and well, it's because of the hope that you have a future hope, um, just like Yeshua had, and it says in Hebrews 12 that for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. Um, and so, I mean, that's sort of the context of it.
So
So,
the hope is resurrection, and what's on the
right.
line is your earthly life. Like what's on the line is whether you'll be put to death or not if you choose to continue serving the Lord instead of serving the kingdom of the world.
Hmm.
That's the
Right.
context.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so, I mean, I'm all about that. I just don't think that that's what people call apologetics today. Um, and my studies at that school, interestingly, Columbia Bible College, and I grew up in Columbia, Missouri. Um, it's so interesting how a lot of those things just sort of happen. Um, and uh, yeah, I that's where I began to really dive into Paul, because Paul was the enigma. Paul was the to everybody. I mean, it wasn't just like to me, or anybody who gets into biblical studies immediately rubs up against Paul, because Paul is sort of this misunderstood character that nobody understands him, and his letters are the hardest um, to interpret, and whereas you have all these plain and simple theological statements from Yeshua, Jesus, and the other apostles like Peter and James and John, and I mean John's a little weird, um, uh, but they don't tend to make contradictory statements within a chapter of each other, supposed contradictory statements, um, and yeah, so that became a really big part of my studies. Um, and I mean, there are a number of reasons for that. It would take a long time, I think, to parse a lot of that out. But I would just say that um, around the 2013, time frame, that's sort of when the new perspective on Paul was getting very popular through N.T. Wright um, and others of that camp. And that was when I got into that, and that was sort of appealing because it was starting to make a little bit more sense of Paul. At least that made more sense to me than the Protestant, the earlier tradition of Luther and such. And I felt like I was getting back to an earlier version of Paul. uh, but they it was the core question of Gentile Jew relations. Even in the new perspective on Paul, uh, there were things that I was just deeply not satisfied with. Um, it it seems like it's like nope, no, you're still holding on. You're still holding on to these things that don't make any sense, that seem to be late uh developments, theologically speaking. Um, and I could just tell that it seems like they're wanting to break ground, and they're wanting to be to shift things paradigmatically, but they're still holding on to the popular um, ideas, and
Some
trying to mix them.
some
Yeah,
certain shibboleths that they
yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
kept as
Hmm.
part of the system.
Yeah, and so um, at the same time that both my wife and I were beginning to look at things like the Sabbath, and uh my wife asked me the questions like, why don't we observe the Sabbath? Um and I'm like, what, why don't we? I didn't immediately come out with Paul's systematic theology of why we're free from the law, or I wasn't regurgitating this stuff. Because again, I paid lip service to it, but none of it ever really made sense to me. And uh and when I'm looking at the new perspective on Paul, they lump these four uh uh particular commandments together into this group, circumcision, food laws, feasts, and um I think there's a fourth one there.
Sabbath.
Sabbath. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it, that always was weird to me, because they never explain why really. But
Right.
I began to realize why those four is because, well, those are ones that's the Jewish stuff. Um, and uh, it's almost like, well, we don't do those things. So this is why. That's how it
Yeah.
struck me, really. It's like it didn't go much deeper than that. It's just uh no one really talked about that. It was just, okay, that seems arbitrary to me. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Um
These are
and
the things we don't do, and we're definitely not going to start doing them. And so there must be a reason why. It's kind of like I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's like there's a verse in the Proverbs that's repeated a few times, and it says, "Do not remove an ancient boundary marker." And some people have kind of speculated on top of that, theologized or philosophized on top of that, to say something like, if you encounter a fence, um, before you take it down, you should know why they took the fence or why there was a fence there, something like that. And there's some sense to that. But I think what's happening here with this kind of example is it's more like, well, they put this fence up and it must have a good reason for being there. So we're going to find the reason because we're
Mhm.
definitely not going to take it down.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. 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 It's what I like to call ad hoc or post hoc sense making. Um,
right.
and we end up creating categories like civil law, moral law, and ceremonial law, and
Hmm.
um, yeah, things like that, and other categories like the Noahide laws versus the, and it's like we're category creating uh, uh, crazy machines that we're just,
Yeah.
that's how we're going to make sense of all this, um and so that question loomed, and then I'd be not satisfied with new perspective on Paul. Going even deeper, I'm like I begin to get glimpses of what might be called the radical new perspective, but that sort of actually um, is more commonly known as Paul within Judaism, um, and uh, that sort of trajectory of scholarship, and that's sort of where I've Um, I mean, ever since I think about 2015 or so, um, I had a short little affair with New Perspective on Paul, but that didn't last very long because there's it's just like yeah, this isn't far enough. I mean, it's kind of in the right direction, but you guys are still holding on to a lot of things that you should just let go of because they're
Right.
they're just obviously not right.
Exactly.
Um, and but yeah, the Paul within Judaism trajectory of scholarship, yeah, I don't agree with every single voice in it on everything, but it's like this is where you're getting back to Paul. This is Paul. um I really have had that sense, and with the what that has, I mean, in conjunction with the question that my wife Jean and I were having with regards to the Sabbath, I began to look historically at what happened. Like what actually happened with the, quote unquote parting of the ways, Sabbath to Sunday,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And the more I looked into that history, the more I was like, ick. Ugh. I was a little bit repulsed by what I found, because I thought there was like this clear cut theological reason um for shifting away from all that, um predominantly in the Gentile world of believers. And what I found is like, no, there wasn't a clear theological shift, like where people read Paul um and the apostles and Jesus, and they just understood that after his death and resurrection and the destruction of the temple, it was like, well, that whole system is done. And like I mean, for one, I mean, nothing like that is in the scriptures themselves. But uh what I found, that the pressure was actually more socio-political. Um, and then the theology sort of happened after the fact, after the dust settled and the
Mhm.
um um it was uh I mean, for at the risk of um being cliche, I would say, is there was a huge anti-Semitic bent, um and um impetus throughout that whole thing. It wasn't a primarily theological thing where Jesus like just inaugurated this new thing. And um no, it was like you mass of Jews, you disgusting people, let's get away from you. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
it was like that. There was a lot of that involved in that. I was just like, what?
And it was like a snowball throughout history. Things just, as the theology developed, it became mutually, or I should say, symbiotically reinforcing to this mass of anti-Semitism, like you said. So, for example, one of the things that developed in the so-called church fathers was this idea that Jesus is Yahweh in some sense, or that
Mhm,
uh, he's of the same substance as the Father in the Nicene Creed language. And once that idea came into effect, you have this association with Jesus and God, or this identification of Jesus and God. Then you then came the charge of, how do they say it? Deicide. That's it. That's it. Then came the charge of deicide. The Jews were the God killers. You
mhm,
know, they killed God. And how much worse can you get than killing God? So they just, the Gentile leaders reacted to that. And as I said, as these theologies developed, it just became worse and worse over time.
mhm. Yeah, and at the same time, in conjunction with getting into Paul within Judaism studies, um, I found that passages like the particular passages that I'd always heard as the passages where Paul freed us from the law. I literally, yeah, somebody, I, I was engaging with somebody in a Facebook group, and someone literally said that in response. Somebody just posted something about the law of Moses or something like that. Just they're just being innocent, and then somebody responded on there, Paul freed us from the law. And that was it. It's like we're just like comfortable making these just one-off statements that are just like out of the blue that uh um sound interesting at first thought, but it was like uh and but of course the passages in the back of your head that they're probably thinking in their heads. Uh and Colossians 2:16 through 17 16 through 17 is like one of those passages. And but through study, I realized literally it says the exact opposite of the way that it was always presented to me in this sort of apologetic. um and uh and so this ties into a little bit of what has motivated my wife and I's journey into um, understanding the law of Moses and it's and the covenant um, and having an orientation towards that. Uh, Paul presents the new moons, feasts, and Sabbaths as a skia of things that are coming. At least at the time of Paul's writing, just when you parse out the Greek tenses of the verbs, they're um they're things that are coming. Like you have like the sense that uh they're we're anticipating these things coming, and Paul is saying that these are a shadow, a skia, and it's usually rendered in English as shadow. Um, when Paul connects that with language like being disqualified from these good things that are coming, but then saying that, according to some scholars, what the phrase at the end of that verse 17 should say is, uh, and are the substance of Messiah. Um, I think that's a very so the whole statement taken in turn would be, don't let anyone judge you with regard to food or drink, um, new moon, Sabbath, and feasts. Um, these are a shadow of the things that are coming and the substance of Messiah. That would be like the whole thought. I think the other option that's on the table is don't let anyone judge you, but the body of Messiah. In other words, only people within the body of Messiah who have the understanding of these things should be making judgments in regard to them. The idea is that there's those on the outside who are coming in Colossae and who are making judgments and swaying people different ways, but yet they're not even in the body of Messiah. They're coming from outside and they're making judgments, and people are being led different directions and policies. That is a danger. Um, I could go either way on that. I think either one is possible. Um, but given the nature of the um, fact that the people coming in, when you read the description of them and you start to piece things together, scholars, I think there's a strong case to be made that these are ascetic, um, a sect of ascetics, pagan ascetics, and they worship celestial beings and have do certain things and certain rites and certain rituals that are for the sake of serving elemental spirits. Um, in in the Gnostic world, you might call these archons. Um, it's like the sense of getting um, to transcending these different levels and getting into contact and connecting with these different archons till you get to the pleroma, the fullness, which is a word that
Mm,
actually shows up in Paul's um, diatribe here.
right.
Um, and because Paul talks about the fullness of wisdom being embodied and found in Messiah, whereas these ascetics are coming in. It's like no, they're saying that the fullness of wisdom is found in this cultic
Mm,
ritual worship of getting to different levels, um, and there are uh, ascetic practices that are involved in that harsh treatment of the body. Paul mentions, but this is all in the service of human traditions, man-made
right.
regulations that he says. So um, when I started to study this, like, wait, I was told that these were Jews coming in trying to get Gentiles to obey the law of Moses,
Mm,
and judge them and condemn them for not holding to the feast and the Sabbath. And it's like that's not the picture here. I mean
no,
that it clearly isn't the picture. I mean that there's no way that is. That the
right.
Jews aren't worshiping celestial beings and teaching man-made regulations. I mean some Jews were, but I mean, they had their own set of man-made regulations, but they certainly weren't doing this. Um,
Mm,
so it was so interesting that that sort of blew things open for me.
yeah.
Practically speaking, but yeah, go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. I was just going to add to your point there about the Jews and these ascetic practices and these man-made regulations, the philosophies, vain deceits, and all that. Look, even if someone wanted to press the point and say these were syncretistic Jews, Jews who were um, combining Torah practices with these other practices, the salient point I think that what you've already said helps us to see is that none of the things at issue um, that are being condemned by Paul are things that are commanded in the law of Moses. So in other
Mhm.
words, these people who are coming and teaching you to be self-abasing, to treat your body harshly, and to worship angels and all of this, none of this is the law of Moses. This isn't the be obedient to
Mhm.
the law of Moses party. This is the um, worship angels with us and obey our man-made traditions party.
Yeah, that really is the salient point there. Um, and so when I follow Paul's rhetorical flow here and the language that he uses about don't let anyone disqualify you, um, it's because when you collate that with not they were a shadow of things that um it's not they were a shadow of things that had come,
Mm,
and it's like the whole idea of that Paul saying that they were shadows that pointed to Jesus. Now that Jesus has come, we don't need those things. We shouldn't go back to those things. But that's not Paul's language. The Greek says that they are a shadow of things coming.
right.
um So regardless of whether Messiah has come yet or not, these are things pointing to something yet in the future. And Paul doesn't want the Colossians to be disqualified from the things that will come in the future. And these things are things that point to those things. So if we forsake those things, then we might be disqualified from the things that they point to. And that just that's just common sense to me. Like when I read that, it's like how could you read that any differently? That's just the flow of it. So in other words, and that's what's led others to really. I mean, yeah, Paul uses the term shadow, but it seems like what he's getting at is that these things, the Sabbath, feasts, new moons, uh, are rehearsals. You're rehearsing something that is to come, so that you'll be ready for it when it comes. You'll recognize it, and you'll be fit to do it. um,
Right. Well,
yeah.
there's often a baked in presupposition when people read passages like this, and I think there's one or two more where Paul uses this notion of shadow, which is that it's a negative connotation. He means it as like a uh, to denigrate these things by calling them a shadow. But that's just a bad presupposition because,
It's
as you
sort of a little
said,
bit of Platonics baked into that.
right. I mean, like you said, it seems exegetically in the way that the wording flows. It's his point is that these things are reflections, if you will. They somehow give you a glimpse of the light that's approaching.
Mhm.
The shadow that's cast by the light and the objects that are in reference gives you an a small window into what the light is actually like and what those things are actually like. That seems to be a more positive way to construe it. We have a similar thing from Paul.
Oh, quick, could I pause for a second?
Absolutely.
Sorry. My my alarm is going off on my phone.
All right, we're back. So just to cap off the point I was making there before the break, people often bring to texts like this where Paul says something about the law, for example, or elements of the law saying that they're a shadow, and they'll just assume that that's a negative, that there's a negative connotation to that. And I think that we need to re-examine that. As you've exposited a little bit here, it seems there's good reason to think that he's actually saying that it's a positive thing by calling them a skia or a shadow. And I'll
Mhm.
leave it there.
Great, yeah. Um, what I want to bring into the conversation here at this point is just in my story, why where my wife and I were at this time. Um, the reason why this made sense to us, and we're sort of walking into understanding the Sabbath, and um, through my historical and theological inquiries about it, really becoming convinced that that the ceasing of doing that was, um, we just had the conviction that that never should have happened
Mhm.
in Christianity. Um, the thing that hit home for us was my wife and I, up until the time again, around 2015, 2016, for a while, since for myself since 2007, really. um uh we had a lot of experience and uh um appreciation of the worship and prayer movement, like the global worship and prayer movement, sort of typified, or I should say, the foundational expression of which was manifested in the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. And um, being a musician myself, and we'll get into that. This is something that really touched me deeply. Um, and for those maybe unfamiliar with the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, that ministry is it's really it's a missions base. It's a base of operations for missions, to draw people throughout the globe into the glory and the beauty of Jesus. Uh, and through that, to the worship and the honor and the glory of God. And it was evangelistic mission, but it was based out of a 24/7 operating prayer room, uh, intermingling worship and intercession together, based off of um, ultimately based off of what the revelation was given to David, in regards to what's happening in the heavenly sanctuary, where you have golden bowls of incense, uh, representing prayer, and you have uh, worship, you have song, that there are instrumentation and song and things happening in the heavenly sanctuary. And so you have this intermingling of worship and prayer. And David, as this theology would go, David gets a revelation of this, and that's why he sets up courses of um, not only priests in the tabernacle, but also musicians, and they all operate together. And throughout the history of Israel, uh, uh, when they were in rebellion and disobedience, and God would raise up a righteous ruler, that ruler would always go back to the Torah and go back to David and realize, we've forsaken the tabernacle, we've forsaken the temple, we've forsaken the ministry before the Lord. Let's get the musicians and the priests back in and have them prophesy with their instruments. And there's this whole thing, and it's like they
Mm.
just say this stuff, and it's like, wait a second, what's going on? Um, it's because there's a reality, that um, and a revelation that David had, and it's always, you find this several times, throughout Chronicles, and where they specifically say according to the commandment of David. Um,
Mm.
and wait, what was the commandment of David? Well, David had conscripted and provided for hundreds of singers and musicians to minister continually before the Lord. And that continued into the temple period. Um, there was always that manifestation of it. It began with the tabernacle, with the tent. This is when David had brought up the Ark of the Covenant, from Shiloh, and brought it. He only had a tent for it, a makeshift tent. But in that tent, he conscripted musicians and singers to minister before the Lord, before the beauty of the Lord, uh, continually. And he even went so far as to go back to the previous location of the Ark, uh, and honor that place by putting musicians and singers there and stuff like that. So
Wow.
it's just like, it is, he really had this sense that the presence of the Lord is a place where uh, worship and prayer happens continually. Um, and IHOP is like the main manifestation of that. Um, yeah, and when part and the message of that is, it's all rooted in intimacy with God. The fuel of the prayer room, why people continue to do it day and night, is for the sake of intimacy, for the sake of love of God. We're drawing near, we're getting to know what's in his heart, um, and become passionate about the things that he's passionate about, so that we can see what he's doing, and it would fuel our hearts. We go into the prayer room, we'll pray about it, and then we'll sing about it, and then the singing will fuel our prayers, and the prayers will fuel our singing. And there's this uh, feedback loop that just intensifies. It really is exhilarating in prayer. It's like the one expression where it's like you could pray for literally hours, and you come out of it and it's like, I'm more exhilarated than I was when I began.
Yeah, this is
some
this
some
is a
people don't some people don't like the repetitious
mm.
nature of the music. There's a lot of repetition of phrases and choruses and singing things almost add an infinitive. um but and some people that may not click with people, but it does with my wife and I, and thousands of others. So
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something about this, a couple things about this really quick. First of all, super fascinating to hear you tell about your story and your journey into that and how meaningful it is to you. And I want to hear more about that. But I did just want to point out for the listeners, you mentioned the revelation through David about this music ministry, if you will. And I just looked it up because I was curious where it was. But in Second Chronicles 29:25, it states that David stationed the Levites in the house of Yahweh with cymbals, harps, lyres, according to the commandment of David and of Gad the king's seer
Mhm,
and of the prophet Nathan. And then here's the clincher. For the commandment was from Yahweh through his prophets.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
this was not just something David cooked up according to the text. This was something that God, through his prophets, through David, instituted in Israel. And I'll just note something here briefly before you continue and we continue. What you're describing is something that I have some experience with coming from the Pentecostal charismatic background that I do. The idea of prophetic music and worship and prayer being mixed together through music was actually a very key part of my experience growing up. And when you talk
Mhm,
about being able to do this for hours on end, I remember, that was something that our services would last for hours. And usually after the message, there would be at least another hour of music and
mhm.
prayer and worship going on after the sermon. So I definitely have some resonances with the things that you're saying, and I'm very intrigued by it and want to continue further.
Yeah, and speaking of First and Second Chronicles, I mean, it's sort of it, I wouldn't say full of this, but it's like it comes often. You read First Chronicles 25:1. David and the chiefs of the service also set apart for the service the sons of Asaph and of Heman and of Jeduthun, who prophesied with lyres, with harps, and with cymbals. That was always a curious phrase to me.
Mm.
How do you prophesy with lyres and harps and cymbals? What does that mean? Um, well, obviously they're not foretelling future events with a liar, but the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. But prophecy, just it's not this mystical thing. Prophecy is just simply telling forth the oracles of God. Um, when people prophesied and spoke in tongues, that they're proclaiming the glories of God. That's just what you're doing. You're bringing things that are realities in the heavenlies, not future events. You're just this is reality. I'm telling you reality now. These are things already formed, even if you don't see them. and and so it's like that's not mystical. It's not soothsaying. It's you're not a fortune teller. It, prophetic music, at least the way I experience it, it takes you places to see things, um, things that are, or yeah. So it's like, um, I don't know if we'd had time. I have a clip that I actually put together. It's a snippet of time. It's actually the whole thing is about 10 minutes long. But it's a snippet of from the prayer room itself during a time of spontaneous um instrumentation. And uh I don't know if it'd be poignant or even beneficial to
Yeah.
really pull it up and play it. The whole thing is about 10 minutes. We and don't necessarily have to listen to the whole thing, but it's sort of an example to me uh, of instrumentation itself that when I listened to this the first time, this was what sort of um, I it literally did take me into uh where I was standing on the sea of glass.
Hmm.
That what's described as is mingled with fire, um,
Yes.
and this sort of this expanse, um, and it was I wouldn't say I don't want to like over spiritualize. I wasn't in a trance or something like that. Maybe some people might say, when I describe it, they're like, yeah, that was a trance. I mean, um, it's sort of like an open vision almost. But it was, um, I was brought there through this music. Um, it just had this nature of it where it's almost like they're taking that place and they're making it into sound. That that's that's almost how I would describe like prophetic music. And
Yeah, that's an interesting
this has
thought.
happened to me before, where I'm playing music and people would be taken somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, and they would describe it to me, and it's like, I mean, I wasn't there. I mean, it was for their benefit. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
just, I as a musician, as a worship leader, I'm trying to be an open door. I'm like, my point is to open it, is to provide the door and then get out of the way. So and not get in the way.
Yeah,
um
that's
and
really
it's
fascinating the way that you describe that as first the music being a doorway into reality that people can experience. But then also the way you said it a moment ago was even more fascinating, which is it's almost like the music itself is a reflection of the reality.
mhm,
That's really interesting. I mean, I know we know just as a fact of human experience that music is extremely powerful, that it can move the emotions, that it can bring thoughts and feelings that are almost, they seem just spontaneous, just happens through the music.
mhm,
Music can almost involuntarily cause people to do things. Like
mhm,
uh, I've seen people, I've experienced it myself. I've heard people talk about it where they'll just hear music and without even thinking about it, they'll just start tapping their feet or bopping around with their fingers or whatever.
yeah,
And even more so, music in the context of worship, I also have experienced it in powerful ways where I felt closer to God. I've never had a visionary experience, so that's interesting to hear about. But at bottom, though, what you're pointing out is that the concept of prophetic music and a ministry based on that is it in the scriptures. Like we just read in that verse
mhm,
you just brought up, First Chronicles 25:1, where it talks about these people prophesying through music.
mhm, yeah. So yeah, if you don't mind, let me just share it real quick. Let me share my
Absolutely. I'd
screen.
love to see it. Um,
I sent you the request.
and aloud, of course. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm very interested to see this. As you're talking about it, this is something I'm wishing I had more of in my life.
Mm, okay. Yeah. So let me know if this is too loud or too soft.
Okay. Seems fine.
Yeah. I'll stop sharing here.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's
Mhm.
obviously, like you said, some people I know would get irritated with the repetitive nature, and some people just don't like that kind of style of music. But to me, it's powerful. It definitely resonates with my experience and my journey, and I am yeah, just curious to hear more of your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the caliber of musicianship and the I mean, I even the production quality, I mean, of it is, it's neat. But I mean, if you notice, there's hardly anybody in there because that's like at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. They're getting into the fire in the night, what they call the
Mm.
fire in the night period.
Mm.
That's the midnight to 6 in the morning. It is what they call the fire in the night. And uh, so there's hardly anybody there, but that's not the point. The point is that uh the whole framework of that is they're ministering before the Lord.
Mm.
They're singing to the
Mhm.
Lord, and they're singing the songs of the Lord, and they're it's not primarily for the purpose of ministering to people. They're ministering to the Lord.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if there's anybody there or not. It's been going since 1993. No, yeah, I
Wow.
want to say, and nonstop, 24/7. Um,
Yeah, that's impressive.
Divided up into 12 2-hour courses, um, each day. Um, 2-hour prayer sets that go one to the next to the next. And driven by music, even the prayer. It's not like they do worship and then they stop worship and then they have a prayer time. No, that the prayer is in the midst of the music. Um, and yeah, my wife is an intercessor. She's had um, some very powerful experiences, dreams, and visions, and has just been uniquely wired through a season of her life to be one who intercedes on behalf of the poor and the needy.
Mm.
And so she leads intercession and prayer. I'm a worship leader, and so it's like we're a visible manifestation that God has married worship and prayer together, and let no man separate. Like
Amen. Wow.
that's really um, a powerful part of our story.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's we've haven't been in that season for a while, since since really 2018, um was really the last time that we had ministered before the Lord, in a corporate setting, in a house of prayer environment, because we moved away from the house of prayer where we were at in Washington State, and then we have a boy, that has some special needs, and we've had to sort of reimagine what life is like, um, in a lot of ways, moved all the way across the country and stuff like that. But it's definitely still a part of us, and something that we will hopefully move back into, uh, manifesting in our lives on a continual basis. We would lead 2 or 3 2-hour prayer and worship sets, a week, um, and it's just been my heart to train to help train musicians in that environment,
Mm.
um, and that there's uh and maybe I'll just take a little bit of time to talk about myself as a worship leader, as a musician,
Yeah, please
and
do.
what that's the um, in conjunction with being gripped by that type of environment, um, and what that means for musicians and singers. Um, I even well, yeah, before I even became aware really of the House of Prayer movement, um I um as a musician growing up in a household of musicians, we we um I guess I would say I'm not a Levite, but it seems like that is a as a musician, that's how my family and I have seen ourselves in terms of what how we picture the purpose of music.
Yeah, by analogy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And one of the things that lessons I learned early on, um, like when I first joined the Air Force and I was coming into uh, leading worship and being part of worship teams and stuff like that, uh, I felt I felt icky if I wasn't um, if I wasn't being true to that um, identity. And um, w- what I would say is the lesson I learned was that as a musician, I need to spend more time ministering before the Lord than I do ministering in front of people
Hmm.
as a musician, as a worship leader. And what that means is if I'm if I'm a worship leader once a week on a Sunday or something like that, um, or like or even if that's my full-time occupation, I need to be spending twice as much time before the Lord than I do in that environment. Because otherwise, if I don't do that, then two things will happen. I will have nothing to pour out um, uh, in the sense of in the context of ministering before people and ministering to people. But and the second danger is that I will stop being a door and I will be the object.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so that's the so my if those who get to listen to this, if you're a musician, if you're a worship leader or part of that environment, um, and whether this is a new idea, I'd imagine this isn't a new idea. A number of worship leaders in the past, like there's Matt Redman, I think, uh, and others who have come to this thing where it's like, I need to get back to the heart of worship. I've spent too much time in the limelight in front of others and had to perform and all this stuff and it's sort of gotten in the way and I've lost the simplicity of the heart of worship and I think it was even Matt Redman who wrote that song The Heart of Worship.
Hmm.
um and so I mean there's that, but even more than that, deeper in that, um what's what's at the heart of that and what musicians like us have to connect with um is the ultimate reality that um this skill is entrusted to you first and foremost so that you can minister before him. It's meant to flow back to him. And yes, when you lead others in worship and when you're in front of others and you're doing your musicianship thing, um others will be hopefully will be drawn into worship of God, and so that's flowing back to God. But before that, you have to flow back to God. um and so that's something that I really took to heart early on. And it's something that has fueled uh me in that environment for a long time.
Yeah, and I mean that makes a lot of sense. You have to have something in the tank, if you will, if you're going to be sharing it with other people. And
Mhm.
it's really important that music as a ministry doesn't just become another concert that
Mhm.
just people go to and pay tickets for and clap at the musicians, and it's just fun. It's something
Mhm.
that's supposed to be drawing people in, or drawing the presence of God to the people, however you want to describe that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate you sharing that from your heart, and I pray that you have more opportunities in the future to participate in that kind of ministry than you have
Mhm.
been able to lately. So I definitely hope that that happens for you.
Yeah. Even something as simple as pulling out the shofar to blow it with a child like Judah, our boy Judah, it sort of it, it leads to a little bit of stress because Judah doesn't handle things like that well. Um, yet we have one of the worship leaders at the International House of Prayer. She's been there for gosh, so long. Um, Laura Hackett Park. Um, uh, we, we we have a set of hers that she had a prayer set that she had recently led as a worship leader, and we play that almost every day. And Judah's there's certain parts where, and it's an intercession set. So what that means is there's worship in the Word sets where the primary focus is like worshiping through the Word. They'll
Mm,
have we'll
mhm.
have cycles of corporate worship, and then the cycles of corporate worship will go into worship in the Word, which is about 15-20 minutes of where they take a passage of scripture and they literally just sing through it. um they it's a singing seminary. They teach that passage by singing through it, by meditating on it and speaking it and singing it. And it's really neat. But this was an intercession set, so they go into cycles of 20-25 minutes of intercession on various topics, and then the the prayer leader prays, and then the singers, it's a call and response type system. The
Got it.
singers then take the prayer of the person and they sing choruses uh, to engage everybody in the prayer room around that prayer. Um, now you're singing the prayers, and then the prayer leader is fueled by that to continue praying and to go deeper. And um, so it's really neat. And when they get intense during intercession, they break out into these choruses. Judah he's dancing, he's raising his
Wow.
hands, and so it's really neat. If you see a recent reel that my wife put on Facebook of him doing that, it's very, very cute and fun.
Yeah, that's
but
great.
but but it's it has been an obstacle trying uh, to give expression to worship and prayer in our household because of certain things that he deals with, um, and you know, overstimulation and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, like I said, hoping and praying that that's something you were able to experience more, because it's obviously very important to you, and you feel like you have an identity and a calling there. So I'm just hopeful that that manifests more in your life from God.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you had more specifics that you wanted to dive into about the music ministry, worship leader, or prophetic music, I feel like it'd be a good time to kind of transition into some other topics. So what are you,
Yeah.
did you have anything else? Okay.
No,
So
that's good. Yeah.
yeah. So um, I was curious. And we've already kind of started to touch a few of the topics that I had outlined for our conversation for theological perspectives, but I think it'd be a good time to kind of dig a little more into how our stories intersected. So specifically, as I said earlier, we met during the through the Unitarian Christian Alliance, which focuses on theological topics like Trinitarianism and incarnationism and Unitarianism and all of that. Uh, but really, where you and I started to interact more was through a series of conversations we had called Jesus, Paul, and the Law. And it was right around that time where you, me, and a couple other friends of ours started to dig into these subjects of Paul within Judaism versus the old and new perspectives on Paul and so forth. And I look back very fondly with those conversations. I remember at the time that we had them, I was in that period that I mentioned at the beginning in our introduction here, in a period of what I would call darkness and doubt, where I wasn't even sure that I could believe anymore that like Jesus was the Son of God. And one of the main reasons was because of this issue of Paul. You know, like you said, everyone has to deal with Paul. He's a very enigmatic figure. And at the time, I was convinced that the things that he said just did not mesh with the things Jesus said. And that was really the impetus for our conversations. And you came into to those conversations with a perspective that was fresh to me, and I would say even fresh to the other people. I believe they even said that some of the conversations points that you brought in were new to them. They were new to me. And long story short, you convinced me. You convinced me of a few key points. And so I thought we could just kind of talk about that a little bit. But before we dive into the details, was there anything more general you wanted to say about how we met, like the Jesus, Paul, and law conversations?
Yeah, you, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm actually glad you were in the place where you were. Uh,
Hmm.
like you were actually in a better place than theologically speaking than a lot of people I can converse with. And the reason I say that, I don't take that the wrong way. I'm not glad that you were in a dark place, um, theologically speaking.
Yeah.
I mean better in the sense that uh, you approach this issue with Paul and you weren't like, this is fine.
Yeah.
Like a lot of evangelical Christians do. Like, Paul's good. I mean, yeah, he did something different, and that's good. It was like, I mean, that's kind of like the sense that you get. It's like, you know, it's sort of like the meme with the kid sitting in the bus and everything's on fire, and it's like, this is fine. It's like, um,
Yeah, definitely not. To me, it seemed like a really big problem.
yeah.
It seemed like Paul's saying these wildly different things than Jesus is saying, having to do with the law, with justification, with righteousness, with obedience, faith, these kinds of things. And it was like, to me, if Paul is saying these wildly different things than Jesus, then like, do I even believe in Jesus? Like, am I even following Jesus? You know, like, what does it even mean if they're saying these radically different things? And
Mm.
I just couldn't square the circle at that point in time. And yeah, so continue, please.
Yeah, and um so at the time I by that time I had um worked out a number of things in my own studies with Paul where I came to some conclusions um and a way of reading Paul that seemed to uh get rid of the inconsistencies and contradictions that other readings produce. I began to realize that these weren't problems in Paul to be solved. The problems themselves uh, were implications of the readings
Mm,
that we had received
mm.
up until that point. That they weren't. It wasn't. I just began to realize that we've created these problems. It's like a self-inflicted wound. No. Um, and so yeah, one of the big things that we discussed early on, and that I introduced, but something that I had worked out, was the was pitting was putting Romans 2:13 and Romans 3:20 side by side.
Right.
Yes, there's something in between. There's and there's arguments in between those two texts, but when you put those two side by side, Romans 2:13 says, "For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but it is the doers of the law who will be declared righteous." Um, and then 3:20 says, uh, "For by works of law, uh, or by observing works of law, shall no flesh be justified." Uh, and certain people, I mean, I would read how people would sort of um, try to read that. and typically what happens is 2:13 becomes allegorized or hyperbolic, um, or basically uh, it doesn't mean what it says, because obviously 3:20 says that we're not justified through observing the law, um, as the reading goes. Uh, and um, well, it's just no, that that doesn't work. You can't change one passage or make it mean something different, or say, or even say, well, it can't mean that, because we have this. And it's like, no, let's approach. Let me approach this differently. Um, Let me see what the entire rhetorical flow of everything is getting at. And I um the common reading of Romans 2:13 that says that, well, Paul is talking about an impossible scenario. Um, that it yes, it's it's true that um, the only way for you truly to be justified is if you perfectly obey the law. Well, nobody has done that. Skip forward to chapter 3. No one is righteous, no, not one. All have gone astray. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So we obviously know that Paul is talking about an impossible scenario. And that's his whole point, is to get you away from trying to be justified by the law. And that's how it all tries to fit together. Meanwhile, Paul is using real people in chapter 2 who are keeping the righteous requirements of the law, not hypothetically, because he's actually using them to indict, uh, at a future point of judgment, those who aren't keeping them. It's like you can't
Yeah.
you can't level a rhetorical argument like that off of a hypothetical.
Right.
Um,
And
yeah,
and you juxtaposing Romans 2:13 and Romans 3:20 in that way, in those conversations, and I think it's a very powerful tactic to help motivate and stimulate paradigm shifts about these subjects. It absolutely did for me because it motivated me to go back and read very closely and carefully Romans 1 through 3. And as I did, like you were pointing out these details about the rest of Romans 2 after Romans 2:13, before we even get to Romans 3, where he talks about the one who does keep the law as a foil for the one who doesn't. Um, I just realized that those kinds of readings don't work. Those hypothetical readings don't work. And forced me to rethink where I was. And over time, as we hashed these things out I think we had 4 or 5 recorded conversations for that series, some of which I didn't partake in, but as I meditated on all these issues, studied myself, prayed, and had more conversations with you and others, I just really did see the light that Paul was not antinomian. He was not opposing the law of God. He was actually juxtaposing the law of God with some other law that is not the law of God, that itself violates the law of God. And I think that's really the key takeaway that when it comes to the theology of the law that I was struggling with, that was a key part of my religious agnosticism at the time. Um, the key thing that you've helped me with over the years is seeing that dichotomy in the New Testament and in Paul particularly, but not just Paul, is the dichotomy between the law of God and these other laws, one particular form of which had to do with, it seems, Pharisaic sectarian Judaism, that had its own insistence on a particular dogma and tradition that was opposed to the law of God. And it's that key insight that has actually really helped me. And I think did at the time really help me to get over some hurdles. And so I've come to dub it the law versus the law dichotomy, and it's been very helpful. I find it to be very powerful. And yeah, I thank you for that because it's absolutely been crucial for helping me to reevaluate the New Testament. And while we haven't convinced the other participants yet, of these things, I'm hopeful that we will. And just in passing, before we move on to other subjects, I just want to mention this insight that you've helped me to have actually helps shed light on a classic interpretive debate in Paul, which is the meaning of the term works of law. or ergon nomo. And so if you want to just elaborate on that a little bit, please go ahead.
Sure. Let me. Where is my window? There. No, there it is. Um, in fact, I actually just want to read what I had recently shared on the subject of works of
Yeah.
law. Um,
Yeah, please.
the sort of this is a summative statement of my conclusion on the matter.
Mhm.
Um, and so I've concluded that Paul uses ergon nomu, works of law. Just a little quick note. I've since stepped away from even using the phrase works of the law,
Mhm.
because ergon nomu is anarthrous. It doesn't have a definite article modifying nomos. It's just ergon nomu. It's not ergon tau nomu. Or so most literal translations in English will say works of law. And I I do that because um, I think Paul uses it as a metonym term for traditions and dogma that a specific community uses as markers of membership that are not based in the law of Moses. Hence, why I have stopped using the term works of the law, because just the very invoking of that phrase invokes in people's minds that you're talking about things that are in the law
Yeah,
of Moses,
right.
in brackets. um, but when you talk about works of law, and then what we'll get into when Paul just says works, like in Ephesians 2:8 and 9, where he juxtaposes not by works or not of works, um, and then says, if you are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which he has prepared in advance beforehand that you should walk in them. Um, and then when he just says law, um, the my conclusion is he's talking about regulations and things that are not in the law of Moses. In reliance on these dogma, and I call them dogma because they're just to point out that these are man-made formulations, they're man-made regulations. Um, the adherents are led away from fidelity, pistis, faith, to God's covenant and the righteousness we are called to therein, because what matters to them, the adherents of this dogma, is the dogma itself, and whatever outward demonstration and or specific confessions in the dogma which a particular community has fixated itself on. Righteousness, quote unquote, then becomes of your own, and that should uh, some passages in Paul should be coming to mind
Right.
when he speaks of not having a righteousness of my own, or in Romans 10, where he says, uh, not seeking the righteousness of submitting to the righteousness of God, but rather of a righteousness of their own. Um, it's precisely because the standard itself originates from the self identity of the community and the desire to be a card carrying member. The key difference here that distinguishes it from the righteousness of the law or the righteousness of faith is that it necessitates setting aside one or more fundamental commandments in the law of Moses, thus failing to continue in everything written therein. This to me brings everything Paul says negatively concerning a law of works and works of law and works. And I'm talking about works specifically within the polemics against circumcision and letter, or the Greek grammatos, uh, together into a cohesive frame of reference as things that are not out of pistis, and therefore through which shall no flesh be justified. And at the same time, maintaining the clear declaration by Paul that it's the doers of the law who will be declared righteous. Um,
Mhm.
so that's a sort of a summative kind of a that's one of the key conclusions that I've come to, on top of the conclusion that um, Paul is engaged with uh, opposition specifically against turning Gentiles into Jews in order to make them covenant members. Um, now, there's I want to point out that that's not a new idea. I mean, this is in Paul. This is part and parcel of Paul within Judaism scholarship, um, through a concerted effort to kind of pinpoint what works of law is in Paul's corpus, and so it's it's kind of academic at this point to say that what Paul was addressing was proselyte circumcision, um, and that's stated quite often. That's something that's um, again, there's sort of a consensus on that. But the problem is, and where I've um, leaning on some scholarship, but it may be even taking it further, is that there actually is a textual, rhetorical convention that Paul uses to distinguish between the law of Moses and these regulations, these community standards, and that seems to me to be uh, located in distinctions between definite and indefinite uses of nomos law. Um, and so that leads to the second conclusion, is that these things are not just regulations on top of the law of Moses. These are things that violate the law of Moses, and that's why Paul speaks negatively of them most often.
Right. And if I could just throw in my way of articulating this into the mix real quick. I remember when you helped me to see this, when you presented this to me, and I came to realize its explanatory power and scope, and just it seemed to me to be correct. One of the first things that I kind of the extension of this in my particular way of articulating it was to root this issue back into the Torah itself, where one of the Torah's main commandments in Deuteronomy is you shall neither add nor take away
Mm,
from the words of the book of this law. Don't add to it, don't take away from it. And it seems to me that the problem with this other this tradition with which Jesus and the apostles, particularly Paul in places like Galatians and Romans, was uh, was dealing with, is that it did exactly that. It both added to and took away from the law. It
mm,
was not just like you said. It was not just like there was they faithfully observed the law of Moses, but they had some extra traditions that they threw on top of it.
mm,
No, their regulations, their dogmas, their law, shall we say, actually resulted in both adding to the commandments of the Torah and taking away from the commandments of the Torah, which is precisely
mm,
why in Matthew chapter 5, verses 19 through 20, Jesus refers to those who break and teach others to break the commandments of the law of Moses.
mm,
See verse 17 and 18. And in verse 20, he says that those who would follow him must have a righteousness that is greater than the scribes and the Pharisees, which is an implicit charge that the scribes and the Pharisees of reference were breaking and teaching others to break the commandments of the law of Moses, which is what he just commanded them not to do. And so
mm,
I just think that is a key crucial insight from my perspective and
mm,
articulation to kind of add on top of what you're saying there.
mm. Yeah. Um, want to see where I want to go with that, because I have a thought on that. Um, yeah, Yeshua, um, there's a connecting point, very much so, between the rub that Yeshua had with certain Pharisees and what Paul is rubbing up against constantly. Uh, in Yeshua's polemical environment, he juxtaposed or pointed out or exposed where the traditions of the elders, and I'm thinking like Matthew 15, Mark 7, um, uh, um, comes up against and violates the commandments of God, or rather, and it's not like a direct. not a direct, when you do this you violate the commandment. It's in pursuing this, it leads you away from the commandments. um and so that's why Yeshua says things like, neatly do you set aside the commandments of God so that you may practice your traditions. um and so that it's the indirectness of that that leads to the problem that Yeshua had. And it's the same with Paul. When people would be of this doctrine, this dogma that says that Gentiles have no place or hope in the age to come. They need to become Jews because it's only the circumcised people of God, Jews, who have any place in the age to come. And so we need to circumcise these people, otherwise they're not really true sons, they're still slaves. And uh well, it wouldn't be immediately evident that that violates the law of Moses, but what it leads to is an attitude of hostility against Gentiles inherently that is not rooted in the law of Moses. And it's actually opposed to the promise that God gave to Abraham. Um, not, but the reality is that the law of Moses itself never commanded Gentiles to be circumcised in order to be covenant members. So in this indirect way, it violates the law because it's an attitude and it's a trajectory that leads to forsake the promise. The promise to Abraham was that in you, all the nations, all the families of the earth would be blessed. Well, in you it is essentially saying by proxy, he's talking about in Israel. Well, and Messiah came through Israel. That's why
Mhm.
Paul praises God in Romans, at the beginning of Romans 9, that uh, uh, um, that God would preserve Israel because it's to them belong the covenants, the promises, the temple worship, uh, yada yada yada, and through whom is Messiah. So uh, the, what Paul's do what um, the whole point of that is, and the whole point of the promise is that, well, all the families of the earth are not Israel,
Right.
but through Israel,
They will be
because through the
blessed.
patriarchs, all the families of the earth would be blessed.
Mm.
That's the promise. Well, what this doctrine does is turns all the families of the earth into Israelites, and
Right.
thus nullifies the promise, because now there's no longer any families of the earth. There isn't this distinction. Now it's all one thing, and you nullify the promise. And that's why Paul says that the law of Moses is not opposed to the promise, but there is a law that is opposed to that. And there is a
Yes.
law that actually doesn't bring life, it brings death.
Right.
um, and it brings it because it actually it causes people to violate the law of Moses, that come under the curse pronounced in Deuteronomy 27.
Right. Yeah, and these waters are so deep, and yet it's so important to dig into these subjects. And you and I have actually dug into these subjects in quite a bit of detail on your channel, Refining Exegetics, where we've gone through Romans chapters 1 through 8 to try to set a foundation for these issues from the writings of Paul himself, showing how it kind of arises naturally from his argumentation there. And you've also got a couple other videos, like one in Galatians 5, where you tackle this a little bit. So, and I'm sure we'll have many more conversations, and maybe some more recorded for your channel and or my channel where we dig into these waters a little bit deeper. But I did just want to give you an opportunity. You mentioned you might need to take a quick break if you want to take that, and then we can start digging into some other subjects. Like I know a couple big ones that you're going to want to talk about are penal substitutionary atonement
Mm-hmm.
and Trinity incarnation. So, would you like to take a quick break?
Sure, yeah, take a
Okay,
quick break.
let's do that. All right, we're back once again. So, like I said before the break, I think Now would be a great time, Jared, to talk about one of your favorite subjects, something that I've learned from you a lot already and hope to learn from you more about, which is the subject of penal substitutionary atonement. It seems that from your channel content so far, with refining exegetics, this is one of your uh, kind of key areas that you've studied and come to key conclusions about. And so, yeah, just take it away. Tell us all the good things, the beautiful, wonderful things about penal substitutionary atonement.
Yeah, well, um, I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about penal substitution. I have a lot to say about it, but then none of it is really good. But um, and that's because to in a broader sense, what one of the things that I am passionate about is understanding and also helping people understand what atonement is in the Bible. Um, and uh, the there's always the what's common ever since the scholastic period in Europe is coming up with all these theories of atonement. Um, and the um, this is based on, well, there are many theories of atonement, and what has happened is one, people have become to associate atonement with theories, and two, they begin to think that atonement is a multifaceted jewel.
Hmm.
Um, and well, there for some decades now, people have been rethinking atonement, and there have been a lot of books regarding that. And the reason being is, uh, I think, is because people are the general population is actually starting to catch up to scholarship. Um, it takes some time for the advances in understanding and uh, to kind of trickle down. Um, it's taken even longer with something like with atonement because in many respects it's there's a whole lot more theological baggage tied to it and supporting it than other areas of theology.
Right. Well, I
Um,
mean, you'll get people that'll say things like penal substitutionary atonement is the gospel,
mhm,
or or they'll say it's essential to the gospel. One of
mhm.
those two, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of baggage around this. Whenever you say something is like essential to the gospel of Jesus, or it is the gospel of Jesus, there's going to be a lot of resistance to any kind of rethinking.
Mhm.
So it's like you said, it's going to take time.
And so the first thing I had to do is tell is is burst that bubble and tell people no, it's not multifaceted. There is one univocal idea that the word atonement conveys in both the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament. Uh, and and the first step I had to take is to tell people atonement is not in the Bible.
Mm,
Atonement is not a word in the Bible. It's not a word that it's translated from any word in the Bible. It's a Middle English word that was made up in the Middle English period through a conglomeration of several words. At one meant,
hmm.
um, and the whole purpose of that was the foundation was the idea that what God did in Jesus was reconcile and bring everybody into one with God to bring together the two parties. Uh, and that was what. And then what after that, what happened was a bunch of models to try to figure out what was the mechanism of how that happened. Um, and the first step I have to lead people to is like, no, uh, uh, if we're to use the word atonement, we're not talking about reconciliation. We're not. That's not what the word means. At
Yeah,
least
that's not
then.
what the so just to be clear, uh, the English word atonement is
Mhm.
is a word that was coined in the 1500s, I think by William Tyndale in his
Yep.
translation. And um, it is not a translation, a direct translation of any word in the Bible.
Right.
He just took the words in the Bible that are being translated, and he just used that word he coined as the translated term. He didn't
Mhm.
actually translate it into anything that
Right.
would be a direct translation into the English language.
Yeah. So that so we need to talk about the Hebrew um root kafar, uh that um it comes from an Akkadian root, um that basically it's like a verbal root that to like wipe. That's like its basic meaning. Um,
So there's something
and
on
then
my wall
within,
here,
yeah,
and I wipe it off. Like that's the
in a
basic
sense, yeah,
idea.
yeah. Um, it gets used in the Noah narrative to talk about the action of like wiping the pitch on the ark. Um,
Mm.
but what you have is you have a verbal root that has like this basic um, uh, meaning, and then that meaning gets semantically extrapolated into different contexts, and in those different contexts that root meaning takes on particular colors. In the Levitical context, how that meaning is colored is rooted in, is situated and located in the use of blood to cleanse. And so this wiping action or root gets associated with the sprinkling and the cleansing that happens with blood. And
And see, I think that idea right there, I'll just note this. I think that might be new for a lot of people.
yeah.
Just the idea that blood was an agent and the purpose of its use was to cleanse something. I think a lot of people don't even know that.
Mhm. Yeah, and this has been in scholarship for at least 50 years. Um, it's just it it's not even touched. It's not something that even is that the general Christians are aware of. But it's getting there. um, uh, and so that's Levitical system, um, and various words get associated that get closely associated with that purification context. In the Greek, in the LXX, you get words like hilasmos and hilasterion, which hilasterion is actually the Greek word that translates the Hebrew kafaret, which is the word used in Leviticus 16 and other places for the atonement cover on the mercy seat. Um, and Helisterion gets used by Paul, and yeah, it gets used by Paul, and I think the author of Hebrews as well. Well, primarily by Paul in Romans 3, 25. God presented Christ as a Helisterion. Um, and uh, that um, Paul is a Jew, so he understands what Helisterion is used for um, in the Septuagint. So maybe we should gain our understanding of what Hilasterion means from the Septuagint and not from um, Greek um, culture.
Which,
Um,
just a note, is something that recent evangelical scholars have done in their
mhm,
works trying to defend penal substitutionary atonement in particular. I can't remember the name of the author or the book right now, but I know that there is one within recent scholarship where that's exactly what they do, is they go to pagan Greek literature to try to find this idea. And so your point is, well, that's just the wrong frame of reference. Paul was a
mhm,
Jew who was raised on the Hebrew scriptures and the Greek translation of those scriptures, the so-called Septuagint or LXX.
mhm. Yeah. So, and let me uh, broadly and succinctly um, lay this all out in terms of what this has to do with Yeshua. Um, this is kafar atonement is a purification rite. The sin offering is really a purification offering. Its function is to purify things that have become contaminated. Um, and this is done through the ministry of a priest, a high priest, or a priest in general. But in terms of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, we're talking about the high priest going into the Holy of Holies to make purification. Um, that's why Leviticus 16, you see the idea of because of the uncleanness of the people, um, not not because of the wrath that's about to break out against the people because they've sinned and God needs to be satiated or appeased, that this is all happening. No, it's because of the uncleanness of the people. Uh, this needs to be cleansed. That's why you have atonement being made for things like the altar and the tent. Well, these are inanimate objects. They're not moral agents who have sinned against God and are thus under threat of punishment and need a substitution. It's just that's it's not part of the frame of reference. No ancient Israelite thought that way.
Yeah,
That
and so
wasn't,
that's
yeah.
so that's to so these comments right here are to address the penal
Mhm.
and the atonement uh,
Mhm.
items within penal substitutionary atonement.
Yep.
So your point is that in the Levitical system, uh, punishment is not in view when atonement is concerned, and
No.
it's also not the definition of atonement that you're pointing out here is that it's purification. It's
Mhm.
not some other model.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the issue is uncleanness and pollution, and the solution is the application of clean substance, life, to counteract impure substance connected with death. um, and so the high priest takes life with him into the holy place. Now he can't, in regards to this, he himself is weak and is subject uh to to sin, so he can't use his own blood, um but he has to use something that represents clean life, which is the blood of an offering that is designated for that purpose. No sins are confessed onto the sin offering goat. It's not imputed with sin or anything like that, and then slaughtered to suggest it's being punished instead of the people. Uh, no, it's a holy thing. The sin offering is the most holy thing, and um, its blood is used as a cleansing agent to cleanse away the uncleanness.
Okay,
And
so
yeah, and this is done. Just the last point is this is done in the holy place. This isn't done like outside the camp or like this is something that happens in the holy place. This is the ministry of purification in the holy place.
right, so that the point you were just making there about the nature and function of the blood of the offering of the animal sacrifice goes to the substitutionary element of penal substitutionary atonement because you said the logic here in the sacrificial system is not, oh, this animal needs to die so that God can be okay with me. No, it's that the life, the as it says in Leviticus 17:11, the life of the animal is its blood. And so
Mhm.
its blood is representative of its life. Because of
Mhm.
that, it is powerful to counteract what a scholar by the name of Matthew Thiessen calls the forces of death. These
Mhm.
contaminants that have a relation to death, the opposite of life, and
Mhm.
finitude, the opposite of God's permanence. They counteract these forces, and they are effective as purification. You know, rather, blood is effective as a purification agent of these
Mhm.
impurities, these contaminants, and that's the
So
basic logic.
yeah. Mhm. And the basic logic here is that God is not the object towards which the offering, the sin offering is directed. It's not it's not for him because again he says in Leviticus 17:11, I have given the blood for you.
Yes.
So it's we are the object of that, the towards which the halasmos is directed. The purification offering um, is directed. It's not for him. It's not to solve a problem in him. It's for us. So that's a fundamental distinction, and something that penal substitution just flatly gets wrong. Um,
Right.
the
And
the
it's
yeah
and it's built on a failure to distinguish between the various kinds of korban or gifts or offerings that are delineated in the Torah. See, because
mhm,
um, not all sacrifices in the Torah have atoning functions. There's
yeah
only some that have this function of kippur. I think is that am I
yeah
pronouncing that right?
mhm,
Um,
yeah
of of actually producing this purification. So, but the ones that do, how does that work? Is it an offering made for God somehow to make him because he was angry before at you, and so now you make the offering and now he's not angry? Is that how that works? No, it's um, for the people who have
mhm,
sinned. It's so that they can take that, give it to the priests, and the priests can make atonement for them, so
mhm.
that their impurities will be cleansed by the method which God has prescribed, which is through the lifeblood of this animal. That's the basic logic.
Yeah. So everybody listening, when you hear atonement, you need to think purification. Just atonement equals purification. Purification is atonement. Not atonement is this broad thing in which one mechanical thing of it is purification. No, atonement equals purification. It's univocal. So when you get to the New Testament, the depictions of um, the associations of Jesus with atonement language, i.e., hilasterion, halasmos, purification, um, the uh, uh, what's the Greek term for purification? I should know this. Uh, Katharizo.
Mm.
Um, that's used in places like Hebrews 1:3. Uh, After he had made purification for sin, he sat down at the right hand of God. Um, that's katharizo. And katharizo is a word used in close conjunction in the Septuagint with kafar. Um, there is no direct equivalent in the Greek New Testament um, with kafar. Only the words in the Septuagint that are closely associated with kafar
Mm.
get translated or get carried forward into the New Testament. I'll put it that way. Um, and so the the depictions of Jesus in connection with these words like katharizo and hilasterion and hilasmos are in regards to purification. And we have to ask the question, where did Jesus provide purification?
Yeah,
Was it on
key
the
point.
cross? Was it on the cross? Did his physical blood bleeding out of himself onto the ground outside the city, did that provide purification, atonement?
Right, right.
No, because in the Levitical system, if we're to picture Jesus as a high priest,
Hmm.
which he is, um, yes, he's of a different order. He's of the Melchizedek order, not the Levitical order, because he's not a Levite. Um, but where does purification take place in the Levitical system? It takes place in the holy place.
Yes.
That's where purification takes place. That's where the life is presented. Now, blood. Now, the animal is killed outside the tent, at the
Mhm.
base of the altar outside the tent. Um, that blood has no function.
Right. And the death itself has no atoning function either. Key
Right.
point. The death itself of that animal has no atoning function. What has an atoning function
Mhm.
is the blood of that animal, which was collected,
Mhm.
being taken into the holy place and being applied to the holy place in the prescribed manner.
And people retort, PSA proponents retort, well, what was the point of the death? Why didn't they just let out a little blood from the animal? If they why did the animal have to die? It's like, well, if you're going to eat the animal and present it as a meal, you have to kill it.
Which people
it's
forget. Yeah,
it's
they just forget that
it's like this
that
is
was part of it.
yeah. I mean, when that connected with me, I'm just like, oh, these weren't just bloody sacrifices; they were meals.
Right.
It's like, so you have to kill the animal
To eat the meal. Yeah.
um to eat the meal.
Which Yes, which
Go
should
ahead.
be ringing in our ears about the eating of the body and the blood of Jesus, by the
Mhm,
way. Side note. And I
mhm,
just want to note here before we continue, you kind of problematize this notion that gets picked up on by people chiefly these days, like William Lane Craig, who will talk about the multifaceted nature of atonement, and it's like this jewel or what have you. And I think they're half right, but they're missing where what actually is the multifaceted thing and what is the jewel. And that is the death of Jesus, the death of
mhm,
Jesus and his death and his ascension and intercession at the right hand of the Father. All of that is the multifaceted jewel because it
mhm,
has different ways of being talked about and different effects in the New Testament. But
mhm,
here's the key: the purification that is talked about in the New Testament, that was an effect of his death and his ascension, that has basically one trajectory of thought, which is the
mhm,
purification, well, I should say, it is purification. And the
mhm,
question is, what is being purified, and what exactly does that mean? How does that work? Um, but the quote unquote atonement that Jesus' death affected is not some multifaceted, hard to figure out thing.
mhm,
Like, but what is, again, just to say it once more, but what is multifaceted and has different ways of being talked about, different effects that are highlighted in the New Testament, is the death, the burial, the resurrection, and the ascension of Jesus.
mhm. And and uh, and the point has to be made over and over again that atonement didn't happen at the cross.
Right.
Purification doesn't happen at the cross. There was no atoning function of the cross. It doesn't purify, it doesn't save it. There's nothing salvific about. I mean, people are going to be like, he's a heretic.
Yeah. Well,
It's like
whatever.
he's denying the gospel. It's like let's take this slowly, point by point. Jesus' death didn't save you. Even Paul admits this. If
Exactly.
Jesus was not raised, you are still dead in sin.
Yeah.
So
People need to
the
listen to
death
that.
doesn't do it. It doesn't get you to salvation.
That's
It
right.
doesn't. There wasn't something salvific accomplished when Jesus died.
And
You're
by the
talking about
way,
a martyr.
it wasn't even just like we need to take this a step further. So let's point this out once more the way that you just said, because Paul explicitly says this at the end of Romans 4, I believe it is. And then also in 1 Corinthians 15. Like again, if he wasn't raised, you would still be dead in your sins. So the death itself was not efficacious for the whole for all of salvation. But let's point something else out. The resurrection itself wasn't
Mm,
even enough. Like just him being raised from the dead wasn't the end of his work
mm,
because he had to then ascend into the heavenly
mm,
place and then make purification for sins, Hebrews chapter 1, and then sit at the right hand of the Father, where he now presently ever makes intercession.
mm.
Like all of that is what brings salvation, not just one thing, and most certainly not just the death.
Paul would have never thought that something salvific happened when Jesus died. He would not conceptualize atonement happening there because Paul is a Jew, and the author of Hebrews would never either, because the author of Hebrews in 9 and 10 clearly lays this out that the purification happened when Yeshua, with a redempted body and an indestructible life, ascends and enters into the heavenly sanctuary to present himself before God. Now, he didn't have to present an animal because he has perfected life. Um, that life is the word that he embodies. It's the word of God, which is life. And that life is the light of men. So I'm connecting a lot of these different motifs just to say
Right.
that life is the word that
That's the key
Jesus
thing. Yeah.
embodies. So when he presents that life before the Father, again, he can do that once for all. He doesn't he won't die, so he doesn't have to do it continually, and somebody doesn't have to come and do something to because he has passed away and now a new priest has to do the reenactment of it. No, it, he he continually is there in the presence of the Father. And it's by doing that, by entering in and sitting down uh, at the right hand of God. Um, how are we? The author of Hebrews puts it this way: we can now approach with sincere faith, having our hearts cleansed from a guilty conscience. Now, the blood of bulls and goats cleanse the flesh in the Levitical system, and that's necessary. And will happen again um, when the in when Yeshua returns.
Oh, now you're
Um,
stepping on some toes.
yeah, yeah. Uh, what uh, what Yeshua does is he cleanses the conscience. And how are we cleansed? Well, by the word that comes forth from him,
Yeah,
that is
sanctify
given to
them
him. But
through your
yeah,
truth. Your word is
I've
truth.
sanctified them. In other words, I've purified them through the words you've given me. Your word is truth. So in the Old Testament, in that system, the real there isn't like a replacement. It's blood represents life. In the same way, um, the the life that Jesus has in himself, that the Father gave to him through this indestructible life, is um, I would say um, what it's manifested and uh, the word that I'm trying to think of is animated by the very words of God. Um, and so we come to Yeshua, who has the words of God, he has the words of life. And the words, when we listen to him, when we obey him, that sanctifies us, purifies us. Not just the flesh, not the flesh, it purifies the conscience, cleanses the conscience. So John in 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And then the very next breath he says, Christ is the propitiation. No, the Greek word is hilasmos. And hilasmos is talking about the purification offering in the Septuagint. So he's the purification offering, not only for concerning our sins, but the sins of the whole world. We are the object of the purification, not God.
Right.
We are the ones that get purified, not God gets satiated or satisfied. It's just so that's as succinct and uh, exhaustive as I can sort of get
Yeah.
broadly with that. There are a lot of different fine details we can get into. The substitution thing happens because people don't know how to read Greek prepositions, like
Mm,
hooper.
mm.
When Paul says that, uh, according to the scriptures, uh, Christ died hoop for our sins. That gets translated as for our sins, and then people, oh, for in place of, instead of, that's just uh historically what people do because they don't know Greek prepositions that well. For is a rather broad, ambiguous preposition that has many different uses. um and if I say I will go to the moon for you, I'm not saying I would go to the moon in your place, as if like you have to go to the moon, but I'm going to take your place and go to the moon instead of you. That no, that what we mean by for there is um I have the ability to go do something and I'm going to do it for your benefit, to
Yeah, on
benefit
your
you.
behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Or
even
for your
on
benefit.
yeah, and even on your behalf, people take that weirdly. That
Yeah. For your
that
benefit's good though. I like the way you said that. For your
yeah,
benefit.
yeah, because um and don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details of how the preposition work, but what Paul is saying is Christ died on account of our sins. That's what hooper means when it's governed by a genitive of a thing. Um, is that on account of those things, those things were the source of the condition.
Right.
And so I
Or
come
just
to
because of our sins.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I sort of the analogy that's most apt for this sort of situation that Paul is describing is like you have an industrial. complex and you have workers and there's safety regulations in place and stuff like that to keep people from getting injured. Well, let's say um, there's a group of workers who decide to forego one of the regulations, safety measures, and they just neglect it. And then a coworker goes down into an area thinking that the safety measures were in place, but because they were neglected, he gets seriously injured or killed or something like that. We can say for the negligence the of the workers, he died. He didn't die in place of them. He died because of them. They caused his death. That's why the Book of Acts constantly says, "You murdered him." You put him to death. I mean, it's like it wasn't a. There's no substitution idea there. It's just you put
Which
him to death.
which reminds me, I think it's Hebrews 6, somewhere in Hebrews where the author mentions that to continue sinning after having come to the knowledge of the truth is as if to re-crucify the Son of God.
Right. Yeah.
So,
There's a conceptual link between the sins of the people and those sins being the the I would say the vehicle through which Jesus suffered what he suffered. Um, the people literally sinned against him, and therefore, on account of their sins, he died. That's just what Paul in places like 1 Corinthians 15:3 is saying with
right,
this hooper language.
got it.
Um, Paul uses the same preposition to say that he suffers for, he endures sufferings for the Philippians. Um, it's like, so is he suffering instead of them? I mean, is he being punished instead of them? No, again, it's still hooper.
Hmm.
It's still the same preposition. It's just a genitive of a person. Um, and so you can do something for the benefit of somebody. Um, and yeah, so it's basic misunderstandings like that that are perpetuated through apologetics, that just cause things like penal substitution to persist.
Right. Yeah, and obviously we could spend a lot of time digging into that issue. And just in short, though, the idea that the gospel is, or what I'm about to say is some essential element of it, is wrong. That, um, you know, we were all bound to be put to death by God because of our sin. But instead of putting us to death, he just put to death his own son
Mm-hmm.
so that because, he needed to be punished by being put to death in our place so that we could have a good relationship with God. Like that's just not what's going on in the Old or New Testaments. That's a fundamental misunderstanding. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely not the gospel, nor is it an essential element of the gospel. Rather, what's going on with atonement is again purification. Jesus is purifying through the presentation of his life in the heavenly temples, not just his death. And that purification, the mechanism, the way that actually works, is actually participatory.
Mm-hmm.
It's through our walking as he walked by being obedient to him that that cleansing actually happens. This is explicit in a place like, for example, First John, where it says, "If we walk in the light, as he is in the light, then the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from our
Mm-hmm.
sins." So the way that the purification that the death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and intercession of Jesus affects works is when we obey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
Hebrews in Hebrews 5:9. Uh, uh, Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered, and having been delivered, he became the source. Having been perfected through suffering, he became the source of eternal salvation for all those who obey him.
exactly
He and Hebrews 12 presents him as the forerunner. going through persecution, going through affliction, God trains his people through that so that the outcome would be peace and righteousness.
Exactly. Cross-reference for Hebrews 5:9 would be Acts 5:32,
Mhm,
where it says specifically that God gave his Holy Spirit to those who obeyed
mhm,
him. So yeah, that really is a key point, that the actual cleansing of sin that Jesus death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and intercession affects takes place when people actually walk in the light,
mhm,
not something that has already happened out in the ether somewhere that has already been done for you, and all you have
yeah.
to do is believe that it's been done for you.
Mhm,
No, John explicitly said that it takes place if we walk in the light. First
mhm,
John 1:7. So anyway, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I want to just move us along to the final
yeah.
topic we had planned to talk about, which is another issue that we've both spent a lot of time thinking about, and it actually, I believe, is the occasion for our meeting, which is the
Mhm,
subject of the doctrine of the Trinity, the doctrine of the Incarnation, versus other theories like what I came from, oneness Christology, versus what we both hold to now, which is a form of Unitarianism that has been given the moniker biblical Unitarianism, of course, because we believe it's biblical. Um,
mhm,
but I know there were a couple specific issues you wanted to tackle when it comes to the doctrines of the Trinity and the doctrine of the Incarnation. So, first of all, if there's anything in general you want to say about those issues, please do. Uh, but like I said, the specifics we were going to talk about had to do with the Malach Yahweh, or the
mhm,
angel of Yahweh, and the so-called I am statement in Exodus 3:14 that apparently Jesus repeated all throughout the Gospel of John.
mhm. Yeah, the only general thing I would say is just that, really rather quickly, is that it may come to as a shock to many people that I would be presenting things against Trinitarian doctrine, um, and that I would not identify myself as a Trinitarian. Um, I'm not going to bash Trinitarians. This isn't me attacking Trinitarians. Uh, this is me examining a doctrine that has been handed to me, that I believe actually is rooted in things other than the scriptures, many other things than the scriptures. Um, and it's part of me wanting to not only be faithful to the scriptures, but also present an accurate Jesus, an accurate Yeshua to Jewish people. Um, that um, so that's a huge part of it as well. Um, and I just find it lacking in scripture support. I believe the scriptures are thoroughly um, present the Father alone as the is the subject, who is Yod He Vav He, and that Jesus Yeshua is his human Messiah that he raised up, who was born of a woman, um, and against the idea that uh, he was some spirit being, that was God himself. Um, I just think that
Or
that's what's
something
not there
else.
out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
or some creation of Yahweh before
mhm.
the rest.
There's two things. So the doctrine of the Trinity really stems from deifying Jesus, and so there's two things that I want to point out in regards to that trajectory of theological thought. Um, and one is, we often hear of the I am, that God is the I am. There's this the I am. There's
The
other
great I am.
yeah, the great I am. Then God identifies himself as the I am. All these types of statements, and one of the things that I just want to present on is, like, that's all false. There is no the I am in the Bible anywhere. Um,
Mm.
and again, I'm getting ready to face the stones. Um, it it's what I want to. It's based on just some basic uh linguistic misunderstandings. And so just briefly, Exodus 3:14 and 15 is the subject of a lot of Trinitarian apologetics. And is the way it goes is um, the Hebrew ehyeh, aser ehyeh, is thought to be um, meaning I am that I am. Like ehyeh is a form of the Hebrew to be or to become verb haya, and um, and it's just kind of assumed. And, and again, there's this isn't actually based on any examination of the Hebrew itself. It's sort of this whole great I am thing comes about by a weird conglomeration of trying to take bits and pieces from the Hebrew and map them onto the bits and pieces of Greek and trying to mash them together um and I want to disambiguate all of that briefly if I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, yeah.
Um Efye is a call imperfect form of the to be or to become verb haya. Imperfect denotes action that is not complete. That's its basic meaning. Uh, what that how that gets rendered, because Hebrew is not a tensed language. It doesn't like have tenses. It has aspects to action. And so how ehya gets rendered pretty much unanimously outside of Exodus 3:14 in the English is with the future tense I will be.
Mhm.
Even two verses earlier in Exodus 3:12, God says to Moses, I will be with you. It's Ehyeh, I will be. And then you just read it through all the Hebrew scriptures. I will be, I will be, I will be. Um, uh, and this is without exception because Hebrew doesn't have a expression for present existence, like present being, something like where we would have participial phrases like I am being, it's almost like the idea of I am being sad. Like they don't, Hebrew doesn't express that. What they, at least not with a to be verb. What they do is, what Hebrew does if they want to say I am is ani hu. They take the pronoun, the first person singular ani, and the second person pronoun. Um, this is where we get the like I am he type.
Okay,
Uh,
so to clarify, there is a way in Hebrew to express I am, but it's
right,
not what is translated in Exodus 3:14 as I am.
correct. And it's
Yeah,
not through a verb. That there is no I am verb. It's the phrase in Hebrew is literally I he, or I shield, and the am is supplied in English,
right.
just to make it intelligible. There is no verbal am in Hebrew. That's just a
Got it.
basic fact. That's freshman Hebrew. I mean, it's basic. But for some reason, people forget this fact when theology of Trinity comes, and they just lose their minds.
So,
Um,
so I got you, and I think it's clear enough the claim that you're making. So then,
so what Ekia in Exodus 3:14 is translated to in most in like in scholarship is I will be who I will be. And then he goes on to say to Moses, tell them I will be has sent me. Yeah. Um, that's basic fact. So there is no I am in the Hebrew there. It's non-existent. Um, that's fact one. Fact two, people say, oh, but in the Septuagint, it says ego eimi, I am.
mm,
Like, well, again, ego eimi is not translating ethie. Ego eimi ho on is the full phrase in the Septuagint, and that's not a translation. That's a theological interpolation. They're theologizing about what they think Echie is trying to communicate, and so they interpolate a Greek idea of I am the being one. I'm the one who is something like that.
So if I understand you correctly, you're implying that the Greek translation in the Septuagint got something fundamentally wrong here.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And I can prove that because later Greek revisions of the Septuagint, like for instance, Theodotion's Greek translation in the second century, the early second century, where he sought to sort of revise the Septuagint to be more word for word. He did a Greek translation of the Torah, which only fragments have survived in through Origen's Hexapla work. Um, and it just happened to have Exodus 3:14 in there. And Theodotion uses the future tense esomai to translate the ehye, and that's again that's future tense. I will be esomai. So the full phrase is esomai ho esomai. I will be who I will be. Well, Theodotion knows what he's doing. He knows both Greek and Hebrew, so he knows that ehye is column perfect, which is for all intents and purposes, when translated into the Greek aspect, is future tense. So he uses the future tense esomai, not ego eimi, ho on. It's like
Interesting.
uh, so again, esomai ho esomai is the translation of the Hebrew.
And just to be
The LXX's ego eimi ho on is not a translation. It's a theological interpolation.
Yeah. Or you could just say it's a mistranslation, right?
Right.
They're
Yeah.
missing what the actual translation should be. And so just to be clear, what I'm hearing you say is that to translate the Hebrew phrase as ego eimi haon is the same mistake in Greek as translated it in English as I am what I am. Like it's just
Yep.
the same
Mm-hmm.
because ego eimi haon in English would be I am who I am or I am
Mm-hmm.
that I am. But that's not what the Hebrew phrase is uh,
Right.
meaning. And your point is that you have a proof of the Greek point you're making in Theodotion's translation, who knew both Hebrew and Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
And
very interesting.
the only way that the only ground upon which Trinitarian apologists can base I am statement that the I am reading of this on is through special pleading. There is not a single instance of ehye anywhere else in the Hebrew scriptures where the translation is I am.
Oh wow,
Not a single one.
wow,
Um, it's only in 3:14, and so you're basically just special pleading that in this instance it has to be. Uh,
wow. Which yeah, which really I can see why it's key for the issue of you know Jesus's identity, whether he's God or Yahweh or whatever, because of the so-called I am sayings, the so-called, ego I me
yeah,
usage that Jesus has in the Gospel of John in particular.
yeah, and that's problematized for a number of reasons. That whole idea. One is because humans say ego e me all the time.
Right.
And
In
not
in
only
the
in
LXS and in the LXX and in the New Testament.
right, yep, yeah. David says ego e me. Peter says ego e me. Rabbis say ego e me. I mean, it's the man born blind says ego e me. It's not a divine title. I am the ego e me is not a title. It's not a name. It's a it's an emphatic self-referential statement that's common in Greek. I mean, it's just if you want to identify yourself emphatically, I am. It's not a I am. It's you're emphatically saying no. The one that you're talking about, I am.
Yes,
I
just to and also
am.
to point out, if people want to push this popular apologetics argument that by saying ego I me, somehow Jesus was identifying himself as Yod He Vav He, that is an argument that is again special pleading because it's
Right.
saying that in that instance, the use of this term is meant to mean something it never meant
Mhm.
anywhere else in
Mhm.
the LXX or in the
Mhm.
Apostolic Greek New Testament.
Yeah. Ego e me is not a name. It's not a title. That's just uh, God gives his name in Exodus 3:15. Yod He Vav He. That is my name for all generations. It's like he's not my name is I am. I mean, no, Yod He Vav He is not I am. It's just it's just not.
Right.
Um and so it uh yeah, again, it's sort of weird um how
Well,
that all has
actually,
transpired.
I just want to note what you just said because it's so important. When, um, yeah, God gives his name as Yod He Vav He, not the phrase that you are translating as I am who I am.
Yeah, and so people go to, but well, okay, so that whole thing about Exodus 3:14, that's fine, but Isaiah 43, God says, "I am He," and Jesus says, "I am He." Think about what you're saying. So, um, when when Jesus says, "I am He" in John 4 to the Samaritan woman, the Samaritan woman is looking ahead to hoping that when Messiah comes, he will instruct in all these things and lead us into the truth. And Yeshua says, "Well, I'm Yahweh." I mean, that's it's like think about how stupid that sounds.
Right.
I'm sorry to be a little harsh with my language there, but just think about the sound of that. Think about how rhetorically that would come off. Like, well, you're looking for Messiah. Well, Yahweh.
Yeah.
That's basically what he. It's like that's kind of what you're getting him to say. And then when he says in John 8:58, well, before Abraham was Yahweh. I mean, it's like is that what you're trying to? It's sort of it's just that's so weird that
It's a
people
very
think
convoluted,
yeah,
it's very convoluted and it doesn't make sense for most
yeah,
people. You have to just get high on it all in order for it
yeah,
to actually to seem to make sense to you.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. And so why am I saying all this? I say it. I mean, I there's a lot more that could be said in regards to uh this topic, but I wanted to hone in on that just because that seems really basic to me. Like if we could just stop saying that, if we could just look at the data honestly and just stop repeating that weird stuff, we could move on in the discussion.
Yeah. It's similar to the works of law versus works of the law thing. There's just a
Hmm.
very basic grammatical fact at issue here that
Hmm.
is being missed through all of the noise. That if we could just it it's a method that many scholars use in their literature to try and help people have paradigm shifts, which is to use language that defamiliarizes people because you get
Hmm.
so familiar with certain ways of saying things that it literally locks your brain into a way of thinking, the words that you use. And so using different words to defamiliarize people to help them see, oh, it can actually be said differently, helps them to think differently. So instead of just perpetuating this use of I am. If we
Hmm.
just use what it actually is, which is I will be, then hopefully that'll help defamiliarize people.
Hmm. Yeah, God just saying to Moses, look, this is what you're going to say to the people so that they will have an understanding um, of how this is all going to be resolved. I will be who I will be. Um, it's like I'm going to be uh, whoever I need to be in order to deliver you. It's just like it's kind of like that's the basic sense of that.
Yeah, and it
Um,
also seems to have somewhat of a conceptual relation to the way that in one or two cases the angel of the Lord um, spoke to someone. There's one in particular, I can't remember exactly where. I think it's the story of when Jacob wrestles with the angel and he asks him his name and he says, "What does that matter to you?" It's like, don't worry about that, essentially, something like that.
mhm.
That kind of sounds, it's
And a
like,
similar thing in Judges when Manoah and his wife when they encounter an angel of the
yeah,
Lord and they ask the angel his name and it says, "Why do you ask me that? It's wonderful," or something like
yeah,
that.
it's like
This weird
yeah,
kind of weird thing in English.
yeah. I kind of get a little bit of a sense of that in the Exodus 3:14 through 15. It's like at first God says, "Hey, essentially, don't worry about that. Just worry about doing what I told you, and I will
Mhm.
be what I need to be for you." And then he does actually give his name.
Yeah. And
Um,
Moses sort of presses him. It's like, but you got to give me something. It's like, okay, fine. I will be who I will be.
yeah.
Just say that to them. Yeah, I'm interjecting a little bit of drama into that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
anyways, so the other part, yeah, with the Malach Yahweh,
Yes.
uh, uh, first off, there is again, let's start bare bones. There is no the Malach Yahweh. There are Malach
Mm.
Yahwehs that appear to do various functions. Um, a Malach Yahweh is just basically a Malach that has been specifically commissioned to do a specific task uh, on behalf of Yahweh.
Let me put it in my words, to I think for the way that it strikes more clearest to me. When you say there is no the Malach Yahweh or the angel of the Lord, the way I would say it is any angel of the Lord can be referred to as the angel of the Lord. It's like
Yep,
the
yep,
angel of the Lord is just a trite way to refer to an angel of the Lord. It's not like some
yeah,
special some
and
special
that
being.
and that manifests in the Hebrew language because a Malach Yahweh is introduced indefinitely, not definitely. There's not a ha before, but then in the same narrative you'll see ha Malach Yahweh. There's like that Malach Yahweh.
Right.
Talking about now, we're talking about the same one. We're not introducing a new Malach Yahweh. Um, so that and Malach just it basically means messenger.
Mhm.
It can be a human messenger or a divine messenger. By the way, Haggai, the prophet, is also called Malach Yahweh.
Right.
Um, so that problematizes the whole thing.
Oh, so
Uh,
is so is the prophesied well, John who we now call, John the
mhm.
Baptist, the forerunner of the Messiah. I'm pretty sure he was called that too.
It
Um,
may be. And the point that I want to draw out is that a messenger does what? Well, he has a message. The messenger
what?
delivers a message. um, I mean, weird, huh? Yeah.
Hmm.
So um, what you have in these interesting instances where people like throw a whole lot of weight on a messenger speaking in the first person I as if he's Yahweh. It's like, well, because he's delivering words. Like,
It can't be
imagine,
that
yeah,
simple.
imagine
It can't
Yahweh.
be.
It's like I want to say something to Abraham. I want to say something to him, but I can't appear before him because he'll die. He can't see my face and live. I'm going to commission a messenger and give him my words. And the messenger is going to speak my words to Abraham. So, of course, the messenger is going to say I because he's using Yahweh's words. It's Yahweh's words, not his words. Um, that just seems, again, that's like, isn't that basic? Don't we just understand that a messenger is delivering a message? That isn't that it doesn't come from him. It's not his message. It's the person who sent him. It's their
I,
message.
Again, we're back to a kind of theological special pleading where it's like
Mhm.
you have this baggage of theology and you really, really want to prove somehow that this is God himself and that it's Jesus somehow. And so it's like, no, it just can't be that simple. And of course, there's, reasons people will give about why it must be God himself or it must be Jesus. I'll just mention one briefly. I've heard people say that the messenger never speaks. He always speaks from from a first person perspective. He never says something like, "Thus saith the Lord."
Mhm.
And so therefore it must be that it actually is God himself. And first of all, that's just factually not true.
Mhm.
There are cases where the angel doesn't just say first person, you know, I say to you, and I'm Yahweh or something like that. He does introduce it occasionally. And another fact I want to point out here on this angel of the Lord business is that in the birth accounts of Jesus, guess who shows up? An angel of the Lord in
Mhm.
Greek. And this is both, if I remember correctly, this is both before Jesus is born and after he's born. There's an angel of the Lord mentioned,
Mhm.
which just goes to show you that it's not. necessarily Jesus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And uh it's aside from the basic fact that a messenger delivers a message, which should be obvious to all, again, for some reason when Trinitarian doctrine becomes involved, we suddenly lose our minds, and and we think suddenly that this messenger is Yahweh, when in fact when we talk about messenger of Yahweh, it's a genitive. Um, it's something that um, it's something that um, the image of something is not the something. It's an image of, a representative of.
Exactly.
So the burning bush incident. I mean, Amalek Yahweh appears in the bush and speaks with first person language, saying, "I am the one who made the covenant with." I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, yeah, because he's delivering Yahweh's message,
Right.
in Yahweh's words. So of course he wouldn't say the God who made the covenant with you. No, it's like I, because that's Yahweh's words, and the
Right.
messenger is delivering Yahweh's message. And it would be a perfect example. I mean, there would be the Stephen's speech before the judges would have been a perfect opportunity when he was laying out the entire history of Israel, to point to Jesus being the angel, the pre-existent incarnate Messiah in the bush. But no, he says an angel spoke to Moses.
Yep.
Like, you dropped the ball, Stephen. You dropped it right there. You had the perfect opportunity, and it just slipped your mind apparently. Um, yeah, so it's uh the other thing to just point out with um messenger is just agency in general. When somebody is commissioned, it's sent to do something on behalf of another, uh the action is accredited to the person who sent him. That's just, again, that's just a basic fact. If I commission somebody to act on my behalf as my representative, I'm doing the action. It's accredited to me, even though somebody else is doing it. Um, so, for instance, there's the instance of Yeshua's disciples baptizing people. Um, it says
Yes.
explicitly that Yeshua was not baptizing people; it was his disciples that were baptizing. But then, in the same narrative, it says that Yeshua or baptized. Um, it's like, because he's doing it through his commissioned agents to act on his behalf.
Right. This is not some contradiction.
Yeah,
This is just the way of
it's how
speaking.
language works.
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah,
how the framework uh works of agency.
exactly. Yeah, both of those are key points. And I just want to read the actual words from Acts chapter 7 so that people get the point about an angel appearing in the bush when you're talking about it actually being an angel. In Acts chapter 7, verse 30, it says that an angel appeared to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the flame of a burning bush. And then scrolling down a little bit further, in 35, it says, it was this Moses whom they rejected when they said, who made you a ruler and a judge, and whom God now sent as both ruler and liberator through the angel who appeared to him in the bush.
Mhm,
So, I mean, there it is. It was an angel in the bush
mhm,
that God was using as an agent to speak to him and to commission him. It's very clear. Like
mhm,
it's not literally God in the bush. It just says God sent him an angel in the bush.
mhm. Yeah, so again, this isn't an exhaust trying. I'm not exhaustively trying to debunk the Trinity or anything like that. It's just these two things with Exodus 3:14, the I am stuff, and then this Malach Yahweh stuff. It's stuff that it's encountered all the time, and again, these are basic things that you if you just stop perpetuating just uh, egregious misunderstanding, and recognize the data and the facts, um, we could maybe move forward um, in the discussion a little bit.
Or to look at it from another perspective, we could move backward in the discussion. And what I mean by that
Mm,
is getting away from all of the intervening confusion propagation in Christian history back
mhm,
to the original source, which was the the actual theology of Jesus and his apostles. Um, and just on that note, historically speaking, it seems to me that this whole angel of the Lord stuff really started with um, the so-called apologists, those who were
Mhm.
steeped in Greek philosophy. Oh, hang on. Yeah, sorry, I had a little technical difficulty there, but anyway, the source of this Jesus is the angel of the Lord. Jesus is Yahweh in the Old Testament. To me, seems to be not the apostolic scriptures, not Jesus, not his apostles, but the pagan influenced. I'm just going to say it. Pagan philosophy influenced apologists that became prominent in the Christian tradition. And so that's what I mean by
Mhm.
moving backward in the discussion, getting to the rhetorical situation of Jesus and his apostles,
Mhm.
not the people who have just propagated so much confusion later on in church history.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Going at least as far back as Justin Martyr's apology with trifle. I mean, again, it's no mistake. It's apology. It's these guys weren't doing exegesis of the passages or connecting themselves with apostolic tradition. They were doing apologetics, at least in terms of uh, defending their own ideas in the midst of other cultural and religious influences.
Right. And I think that the one of the fatal flaws of the apologists was, and this is seen even in the modern day, is that it's not like you said, they had conducted, exegesis and had come to the truth of the scriptures
Mm,
and then were essentially defending that. It's that they had two things happen. They had a bunch of ideas that they had received that had been corrupted,
mhm,
and then they tried to make their theology amenable to
mm,
people of their day that they were interacting with to try to make it appealing to them
mm.
instead of just essentially standing their ground on the truth that they had received. Which, by the way, side note, that's the message of the apostolic scriptures is, hey, we have this truth and you need to hold on to it and live it, not go out
Mm.
there and just try to make it amenable to people.
Yeah,
Um,
and
that's a
this
that's
is
a key point.
and one thing that we really didn't get to at this segment that I wanted to say in regards to this whole apologetics thing, just to wrap up on my end, is uh, sound doctrine in the Bible is that which accords and leads to godly living. A doctrine is a teaching that teaches you how to live. A doctrine is not a formulation that teaches you what you are to confess in order to
Mhm.
be part of the faith.
Mhm.
Um, because the faith is a way of life. It's not a set of propositions.
Mhm.
Whenever you, and I encourage listeners, go to Paul's epistles, particularly his pastoral ones, and where you find the term sound doctrine, look at what in the context what he's talking about. Sound doctrine is something that he's trying to have his audience hold to in order to combat bad doctrine. And the fruit of the bad doctrine is licentiousness, lawlessness, and ungodliness, dissensions, strife, things that the law of Moses is opposed to.
That is
Um,
behaviors that, as Paul says, will keep people out of the kingdom.
right. Yeah. So sound doctrine is teaching about how to live. Um, so when you think of sound doctrine, don't think of things like justification by faith alone. That's not doctrine in the biblical sense. That's a man-made formulation. That's systematic theology. That's what that is. Um, no, uh, it's sort of like the proverb. The father saying to his son, "My son, listen to my uh, listen to me. I give you sound doctrine. Keep the commandments. Keep my instructions, the Torah." Um, it's so it's like um, doctrine is that which leads to life. It leads to godliness. And so you it's worthless to try to, in my opinion, to apologize on propositional statements. Those aren't the doctrines of the faith. The doctrines of the faith are things which lead to godly living. Um, you know, loving your neighbor as yourself. That's sound doctrine. Um,
Mm.
uh, if you want to enter life, keep the
Keep the
commandments.
commandments.
Yeshua,
Mhm.
that's sound doctrine.
So really, so in that sense, sound doctrine is really just true teaching,
Mm-hmm,
true instruction,
mm-hmm,
that is oriented around the centralizing principle of keep the commandments.
mm-hmm.
That's really what it is.
Right. Yeah.
And then the rest is just quote unquote theology.
Mm-hmm,
Now, that this might be a funny thing to say, given that my show here is called the Theology Experience. Um, but really, the goal of the walk that we have before God in the footsteps of our Messiah, Jesus, is not about theology. It's about
mm-hmm,
um, faithfulness by keeping the commandments. That's a key point that we have come to in our own journeys, and I think is key to keep in mind. That's not to say that the theology, the thinking about the what this all means and making sense of all the various things that are said in the scriptures, attempting to quote unquote systematize and harmonize and all of that. That's not to say that
mm-hmm,
that's all wrong. Like
mm-hmm,
there has to be a true theology, if you will. There has to
mm-hmm,
be true propositions about these various subjects that we can speak about. But
mm-hmm,
it's just to say that, as you said, the focus of quote unquote sound doctrine is not all of that.
mm-hmm,
It's walking in obedience to the commandments.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and so with that, we've covered all that we had intended to cover. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure not in the depth that all these subjects deserve, but
I do want to, if there's a future episode uh where we get to engage again, I would, I think it's fruitful to go back and forth with you on like the deeper subjects of judgment and justice, wrath and
mm,
punishment, because I know there's some back and forth to be had there to sort of move that discussion forward, and um, yeah, so
yeah, absolutely. Lord willing, if we get another chance to do this, we should definitely hit that and maybe dig into more of the law and all of that. But I think this was a great episode to introduce you to the channel and to the people who aren't yet familiar with you. And so I just want to say thank you so much for giving me of your time. I know that it's late or early over there, but it's been great conversation. I'm looking forward to reviewing it with my uh, followers. But with that said, I'm gonna give you the last word, and then we're going to head out.
yeah, thank you so much, Trey, for um, giving me a spot on this to talk about these things, and yeah, I very much appreciate your friendship and our conversations together, and look forward to doing more episodes with you on my channel, Refining Exegetics. There'll be a lot more in Romans, and can't wait to get into Galatians more with you in the future episodes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, and God bless you. Talk to you
God
later.
bless you.